So check your email and your recording will be there. We're going to be talking about Intermediate DAX for Power Pivot. This is based on chapter 9 of my book, Modern Data Analytics in Excel. The way this works is you don't have to read the book. This is kind of an overview of what's in the book. And if you want to check it out later, you can do so. I'll leave you to your own devices. Let me move my microphone closer to me. We might get better sound that way. You can find the book wherever books are sold, as they say, and we will dive right into the content right now. So the first thing we're going to do is, as usual, get everybody situated with the download. So we will walk through that briefly here. The way this usually works is that people end up coming in a little later, so they might not see that download link. So if you catch somebody asking before I get to them, you are welcome to recirculate this link. So I just let that in your chat box. You're welcome to use that chat box to communicate with me. I've got microphones and cameras turned off just to avoid any kind of ambient noises. So what you'll want to do is click that link. That should get you to a compressed folder. It should just pop right into your downloads folder. I'm actually going to put that link in the chat again already. I'm going to put it in one more time because we still have people coming in. Okay. And what you'll want to do is just make sure that you decompress that folder. Otherwise, you'll probably have some issues with the files. All right, so just hit extract all. All right, that's all you need to do. And you should have the folder. It should see something like this. Modern Analytics Excel book main. That's the folder that you want. Okay, I'm just going to throw this link in the chat one more time. Okay, and then what I'm going to ask for you to do is I have downloaded the folder. Okay, just let me know. Okay, give me a little thumbs up like I just did in the chat box. Okay, you can leave a reaction right there. Okay, and I'm sorry to keep spamming everybody with that link, but people keep coming in, so I'm gonna keep adding it. Okay, I see one thumbs up. Okay, yeah, just throw me a thumbs up in there. Throw me a thumbs up in the chat. I mean, whatever. You know how to get my attention on Teams, I would think. Anything you can do to let me know you have the link, and it looks like we still have people coming in, so I'm gonna throw that link in the chat. Sorry to keep spamming everybody there, but it's the way Teams goes. All right, there we go again. Okay. Should need like a loop or something to do that. All right, so I'm gonna assume people have the downloads, and again, this is all being recorded, so if you missed a step, just, you can come back and get it. But we're gonna be on chapter 9 today. Okay, so we're definitely farther along in the book. This is gonna be a little bit more advanced of a session. Okay, so I'm hoping that you're familiar with Power Pivot. If you've never used Power Pivot before, this might be a little hard to follow, so you can check other recordings, you can check my book, and you might just need to sit and kind of watch and take it in. This might not be a session that you can do hands-on if you've never used Power Pivot before. Okay, so what we're going to do is start here in chapter 9. All right, and we're just going to go to the chapter 9 starter file, and the solutions are right here. Okay, so that will kind of walk through everything that was done today and everything that was done in the book. All right, any questions about any of that stuff before I continue here? Everybody feeling okay? We are recording. I know that's always the golden question, and then I think I copy pasted the dickens out of that download link, so hopefully you all have it. Everybody good. Euler, signs of life here. Just a quick thumbs up or okay, we'll do it. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ronnie. All right. Okay, so what I've got here in Excel is a pivot table. This is not any ordinary pivot table. This is a Power Pivot pivot table. So how do I know that? Well, the first thing is, and again, I'm in the chapter 9 file. Okay, so the first thing is if I click in here, pivot table 1, you should see this pivot table field. If you do not see this, you might need to right click and it's going to say show field list right here on the pivot table. Just right click anywhere on there and your field list should show up or reappear, disappear. Okay, so we have multiple tables reporting into this pivot table. So that tells me that I'm working with Power Pivot. That's really the only way you can do that in Excel to report on multiple tables at a time is with pivot tables. Okay, I'm sorry, it's with Power Pivot pivot tables. We want to use the ones that have this little orange cylinder. So basically, I did this workshop a couple weeks ago where we got up and running with Power Pivot. We took these, we have 3 tables here. This is a Superstore data set that's really common in Tableau. It's like a starter data set that they use. And what we did here was create a little bit of a data model to relate all these tables together. Because typically in the past, what you'd have to do is, let's see, I've got an order ID right here, and maybe I have like a region over here. Okay, and if I wanted to add these supplemental columns into my table to report on everything, that would take a lot of like lookup functions. The majority of the time, I don't know if it's majority, but a lot of the time, the reason that people's workbooks get really slow is that they have a lot of lookup functions and they're putting all the data together into one master table. And that master table is just very compute heavy, okay? And it really bogs down your workbook. So what we're doing instead is creating a data model with Power Pivot that only really repeats and adds and computes on these fields when needed. Okay, so that saves a lot of compute power rather than VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP calculating and recalculating, and you've got all these formulas and just bogging down your workbook. Using Power Pivot is a lot sleeker of a tool here. Okay, so we're going to use the ones with the little orange cylinder. That tells me that these were the ones that actually are connected to the data model because we started with these, okay, these 3 tables. Then what we did was we fed them in through Power Query. Okay, so the first step is, let me open up my notepad here. Okay. Okay, so we want to read our data in. Let me get rid of some of these other ones. Okay. Read data in from Power Query. Okay. And then we're going to model via Power Pivot. Okay. And we're going to load via a Power Pivot table. Okay. But before we really dive into playing with that thing, we should go through these 2 steps briefly here, just so we know that everything's been set up. Okay. So if we go to data, okay, and then queries and connections, I'll put that in the chat. And what we want to check here is actually queries and connections, plural. Let me see if I can edit that quickly. Okay, I don't see a way to do that. It's queries and connections. Okay, so we have 3 queries here that we've already loaded into Power Query. Now, I don't know why this one says 0 rows loaded. We can definitely right-click and edit that. So again, data, queries, and connections. This shows us everything that we've read into Power Query. So we've read these 3 tables into Power Query. If there's anything that we wanted to do here, like if there are any columns that we don't need, or if we wanted to like split any of these, do like text to columns or filter the data or sort it or whatever we wanted to do, that would be the time to do it. So Power Query is more of your data cleaning tool. Okay, you want to get your data into as clean of a shape as possible. You only want the columns that you need. You want your data, in the granularity that you need, all that good stuff. Okay, these data sets are in a pretty good shape, so we're not really going to use Power Query. And my book, part 1, actually does talk about Power Query. I've got plenty of, recordings if you want to look at that later. But that's Power Query, so that's our first step. So we're good here. So I'm just going to close and load this back in. Okay, and I'm just going to disregard it saying 0 rows loaded because that's obviously not true. Our next step is to go into Power Pivot, which I've actually already done for us. Okay, so you may have noticed when I do this, there's this right click. Okay, so again, I'm in queries and connections, and these queries have already been set up for us. Okay, right click, there's this button that says Load To. Okay, so this is the same button that when you're in Power Query. So Power Query, again, like we talk about, and I talk about a lot. Let me go back to my notepad. Okay. Power Query is an ETL tool, which means we extract, we transform, okay, and we load. So our data could be coming in from anywhere, like databases, the web, a CSV file, other Excel workbooks, okay, or just a table, which is what we've got right now. Transforming it, like we talked about, filter, sort, split columns, all that good stuff. Get our data into a Power Pivot format where the data is as clean as we can get it before we report on it. Okay, and then loading it in this is how it gets into your workbook. Okay, now you could just load it in, right? One table at a time, into an Excel table or pivot table. What we're going to do is do like a Power Pivot table via add to data model and connection only. Okay. So what that means is we've already loaded these data sets here. Okay. I'm going to right click this again and load to. All right. And what this is saying here is that I'm only creating a connection, which means that we're going to repeat this data in my workbook. This is going to be in the background. It's going to be available for us to do what we want with it, kind of on the back end of Excel. And particularly what we want is to add this data to the data model. So if you go into your queries and connections right now, these are already added into your data model because this is really the portal that's going to get us into Power Pivot. Okay, so I'm going to actually even put that in the chat because just make sure that if you want to use Power Pivot, this is really the step that you want to make sure that you nail. Okay, add this data to the data model. Make sure that that's checked on. Okay, if you go to the Power Pivot tab, there actually is an option that you can add data directly to the data model from a table, but I would suggest, so rather than doing table to Power Pivot, I would definitely suggest doing table to Power Query and then to Power Pivot, which is what we just did. All right. Any questions about any of that, like setup and kind of sussing out what we've got here and making sure that all the prerequisite steps have been met before we try to add measures and analyze and report on our Power Pivot pivot table? I just need one thumbs up. Okay, I think I saw one. I'm just gonna say that I saw one. Okay. Thank you. Okay, good. All right. Thank you. Okay, so we are gonna dive into our Power Pivot editor now. Okay, and confirm that the data model is set up. All right, so we're in Power Pivot, this tab. Okay, if you don't see this, you do need to enable it. So, you can check that out later, check out my book, whatever you need to do. Ask me if you need to, but I don't really have time to go through adding it right now. But we're going to click add, manage data model. And this is where we kind of open up the hood and see what this data model looks like. Now, there are a few things going on. Inside of Power Pivot, it is kind of a dated interface. Unfortunately, it's not been really as up to date as Power BI, which actually is the same methodologies and tools. You can use the same stuff that we're doing here with Power Query and Power Pivot. It's a little different in the interface. It's a lot more modern looking, but this is a little dated, unfortunately. You're going to see that we do have something that kind of looks like Excel. We can leaf through these worksheets. And this is the same kind of thing as with Power Query, where the data is pretty much locked down. So we can't individually hard code any cells or make any real changes to the data set. Okay. Really, the main thing that we want to do with with Power Pivot is to find relationships among these tables. Okay. And then we're going to add measures. And those are the things like looking at total sales, looking at sales year to date, comparing maybe one region sales versus total sales, and getting a little more sophisticated with the reports that we can build in Excel. Okay, so these are the data components. This is called data view. We can just kind of see what kind of data we've got here. And now we want to go to diagram view. This is already done before. You can check out previous sessions or check out previous chapters of the book in actually creating the relationships between these tables. Okay, so when in doubt, if you've never done this before, I like to think of this as if you were to do a VLOOKUP between these tables, how would you do it, right? So in this case, we've got a returns table. And again, if you want to actually see, sometimes it's easier to like actually see that data before you figure out how you create that relationship. You can always go back to data view and do that. It's a little hard to look at in here, but you can get the hang of it. So returns has an order ID column, right? Orders has an order ID column. Okay, so that's a match right there. That's how we would look up those tables, basically. Okay, same thing with users. I think in this one, we have a region field that's found in both of them. So now what we've got here is this data model. And if you ever used like Access before, it's kind of a similar, drag and drop, create the relationships. And we do have like a very lightweight relational database almost, okay? We say Excel isn't a database, but Power Pivot is kind of a partial exception to that rule. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is let's just close out. So we've done everything. We've looked at the relationships. We've looked at the data in Power Query. We've kind of traced out the pipeline. So now what we're going to do is actually get into building some measures and doing some reporting and things like that. I've already added this pivot table into the worksheet. So we're just going to use this pivot table 1 as our starting point here. Okay, so like I said, what we can do here is we can actually report on data from multiple tables. So maybe we wanted to, break down sales by the manager. So what I did is hit that little drop down. You can also search for individual fields up in the search box. I'm going to check sales here, and I'm going to bring this up. Okay, and I've got some of sales. So this is just like a regular pivot table, except we've got multiple tables. Okay, I can drag and drop my fields and so on and so forth. Okay. Where things get a little more complicated is what if I wanted to analyze something like a profit margin that isn't necessarily, and this is what we showed in the last example. Question about, I see the table names twice. Can the non-data model tables be hidden here? Not that I'm aware of. Unfortunately, it's just, there's no way to hide them as far as I know. So it's kind of annoying, but it is what it is. Good question there. So I've got this pivot table, okay, and if I wanted to make like a profit margin, maybe some of you have done this before, where you could come up to pivot table analyze, and there's this fields, items, and set box here. You could create a quick profit margin field and take sales over profit or vice versa. Okay, that's not there right now. It's grayed out. Okay, so we need to actually create our what are called explicit measures. So there's implicit, and we talked about this way like in much more depth last time. There's implicit measures, which are drag and drop, okay, and then there's explicit measures, which is, DAX created in your measures table. Okay, so these are going to be a lot more reusable. They're going to be a lot more powerful. And we really can't get very far if we're just going to drag and drop fields into our table. This is actually the same in Power BI. If you've tried to create a chart or things like that, and you're dragging and dropping fields, it's actually better to explicitly create that measure in DAX rather than just use it implicitly and drag and drop it on the fly. So what we're going to do is go back to the drawing board here. Let's go back to Power Pivot, okay, and I'm going to go back to Manage Data Model. All right, and we should actually see right here, it's been created. If you were wondering what this weird like worksheet is here in Data View, there's actually a button right here that says total sales. So this is the implicit measure that we created. So Power Pivot is tracking these, but they're not really easy to like keep track of. I mean, this grid is kind of weird. Like we can't reuse them. It's much better to create them explicitly ourselves here. Okay, so this is the implicit one. You'll see there's like a little pivot box. It might be really hard to see. Okay, where it says sum of sales, sum of order sales. Right here, I want to delete that one. Okay, we don't want that one. Okay, this one that says total sales. Okay, just go ahead and right click and delete it. Okay. If you deleted the other one, that's fine. This one says total sales. So this is the first one that we saw. This is one that I actually made earlier. And the nice thing about this explicit measure is it is down here in the worksheet. So just kind of avoid that, ignore it. What we really want to do, not look for measures down here because it's messy and weird. Go up back out of Power Pivot. So you can just exit out of there. Okay. And now let's go up here into our Excel worksheet. Okay. Where it says measures. And there's this button that says manage measures. Okay. This is where we want to look because these are our explicit measures. These are things that we've defined independently and we can reuse them, we can refer to them, and this is really where the magic happens in terms of being able to do things like add a year-to-date field, to compare year over year, month over month, things like that, which we'll do in a little bit here. So this is really where we want to be looking for our measures, and we're going to be creating some more sophisticated measures than just like sum and average and things like that, which is what we did the last time. So we basically got ourselves caught up to speed from last time, okay? And we are now here in manage measures, okay? And now our goal is to build some more sophisticated measures here in Power Pivot. Any questions about anything that we've done so far before we go into the calculate function, which is an important one? Awesome, thank you. Okay. All right. So what we're gonna do here, just to get started, is one thing about pivot tables is, so I'm gonna use total sales, and this is our explicit measure. You'll notice in the pivot field, the pivot table box, that it's got that f of x next to it. So that's another kind of visual indication that we're working with an explicit measure here. So I'm going to go ahead and drag that in there. Okay. And you'll notice that it's already formatted, which is nice. Like once you apply a formatting, it'll apply other places in the pivot table. So that's another nice win. So the thing about pivot tables is I've got total sales right here. Okay. What if okay, so my total sales, my grand total is just about $15 million. I'm going to paste this in here. Okay. And if I wanted to maybe segment this out, okay, I'm going to add a filter in here for customer segment. All right. And I'm going to choose consumer. Okay. So again, just drag and drop customer segment. Make sure you're using the one with the orange cylinder. Okay. Drag that into filter. Okay. And then there is like a little checkbox to expand. Just select one of the categories or segments. I check consumer. Okay. So now it says the grand total is $3 million, give or take. Okay. Um, this is the grand total of what is in the pivot table, right? So this filter drives the entire pivot table, right? Everything that's being calculated, everything that's being reported on, all the data that's being included is kind of subjected to this one single filter. Okay. But there are some times where, maybe you still want to show like a percent to total, right, of total sales. So what is the percent to total of customer of the consumer line versus total sales? Or maybe, an important one is if we were looking at things, let me go ahead and remove customer segment. If I put like order date up here in the filter box, okay, and I, was only going to show the dates. Okay, this isn't a great example because it's making us do it by day. Okay, but I just filtered the data for this single day. What if I wanted to show my sales from yesterday, right? That's going to be really hard because this filter is kind of driving what's shown on the entire pivot table. So what we want to do right now is do something that's going to actually override that filter. This is called filter context in Power and DAX. Okay, we want to create some measures that actually override the way that this and almost create our own like on the fly filters that can be included inside of this pivot table. It's kind of a hard concept to like wrap your head around. It's going to take a little while. Okay, we're almost getting into like, when you learn Excel and you get into like VLOOKUP and pivot tables, and it really shifts your way of thinking. You have to start thinking about Excel a little differently. This is really the same kind of thing that we're doing here in DAX, right? This is getting you kind of your driver's license. You're a little more intermediate with what you're able to do here. Okay, so that's what we're going to do right now is look at the calculate function as a way to modify and override our filter context here. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that out here. We're going to look at our ship modes, okay, and we want to be able to always see total sales as it relates to one particular ship mode or another, right? So maybe we're looking at the holiday season, we're looking at our freight traffic, and we really want to be able to easily compare and contrast different ship modes without this filter context kind of hiding the data that we might want to always be seeing, if that makes sense. Okay, so we are going to create a new measure for this. We're going to go to new measures. Okay, and I'm going to call this one, let's call this total express air sales. Okay, we can add a description in here if we wanted to. I'm just going to go ahead and leave that blank. And then we do start with a little function here. So we're going to write a basic DAX measure right now. We're going to start with calculate, like we talked about. Okay, so calculate, I'm going to hit the tab key. So this has autocomplete, just like Excel formulas do. Okay, so we want to add a few things in here. First of all, we want to specify what expression do we want to modify that filter context by. Okay, so I'm going to use total sales. Now this is where you start reusing and using and defining and renaming, or not renaming, but referring to measures that you've created already. So for example, I've already did total sales, I thought. Yeah, there it is. Total sales is right there. So I'm just going to start typing total sales. Okay. And you will see that there is that little sigma sign that tells me it's a measure. Okay. So we're going to take total sales, and I always want to have the total sales that were fulfilled by express air shipping. So what I'm going to do, this is the filter that we're adding right now. So we're almost like filtering the data on our own terms right now. So what I'm going to do is orders. Let's find our ship mode. Okay. And I will put this all in the chat so you have it. I know it's probably hard to follow along while you're watching it. So let's take express air. Okay, let me go ahead and put that in the chat here. Okay. And now what I'm going to do, just because I'm here, is format the data. That way it's always going to show up as a currency. Okay. It's always going to show up as two decimal places. Okay. So what I could even do here is, let me take a little screenshot so you have that. This is also in the book, so you can check that out if you wish. All right. So we're going to click OK. If you want to go ahead and jump around or jump forward, you are welcome to try it out. Just click OK, and you should be able to add it to your pivot table if it doesn't add on its own. Okay, so what we want to do is find it. Okay, total express air sales. All right, so let's go ahead and add that into our pivot table. So this is always our express air sales. So now it's kind of cool, like we're able to actually see, what were the express air sales. So we almost have like a filter in itself within the table. So, this would be really easy to say, like, in each region or among each manager, what percent of sales were total express air, for example. So we're really able to start to slice and dice our data in a new and different way that might have been difficult to do otherwise. So let's combine on that and add this a little bit further. I'm going to go to new measures again. And let's try something like total sales for high priority and express ship. So I'm just going to get even a little more granular with what I want to see in this modified filter context. So this time it's going to be pretty similar. We're just going to have two filter conditions this way. So we'll take total sales. Okay, not total express air sales. All right, we're going to start with the grand total, and then we're going to filter it by two conditions here. Order priority. There we go. Okay, let me search for order priority this way. Okay, there we go. Okay. And we're going to make sure that that is high. All right. And then we're going to check for the ship mode, not the ship date, the ship mode. Okay. And again, I'm just hitting tab to complete my thoughts there. Express air. Okay. Looks like it's a little glitchy and laggy right now, probably because I'm sharing my screen. This check formula box is a good one to know. Like if you're not sure if something worked or not, hit check formula and it'll kind of catch any errors that you might have. So it looks like this is good. For whatever reason, it was just a little laggy on my screen. So let's click OK on that one. Okay. And that got added to our pivot table. So now again, we're able to actually see, various components, and rather than one filter kind of overwriting everything, maybe you do want to see the express ship component, right? And the total air component and the total component all at the same time. So those are all kind of like different filter contexts, if that makes sense. All right, if I wanted to change that to an or, any questions actually before we move on? Everybody good, making sense? It'll take a while to kind of sink in, but hopefully you're seeing the value and it makes sense. So we don't need to use the filter function. As far as I'm aware, there might be some use cases where I'm not familiar with filter function, but this is the way that you can do it, and there might be other ways. That's all I'll say for that. Any other questions? Okay, mine's coming up the same amount. Okay, so that might be, I don't know what measure you used. I think you'll just want to make sure that the measure is the same. So let me put in the chat the measures that I'm using and just make sure that you've got the same. It looks like you might have the all function in there. We're going to talk about the all function in a second. Okay. So just make sure that your table looks like this. Okay, that was kind of hard to see, but anyway, all right. Okay, I think you can click on it and expand it. Anyway, all right. So the OR function would work pretty similarly. If I come back here, if for whatever reason we wanted to filter by an OR condition, we can do that. I'm going to edit this measure that we just made with express error and high priority. Maybe I want both. Maybe for some reasons there's some orders that are high priority that aren't being fulfilled via express error. So I actually want to see both of those. Okay. Works pretty much the same. All I need to do here is actually use the two. They're going to be these two pipe operators right there. Okay. So rather than using what we had before, which is, I believe, just a comma, in this case, we are going to use those two pipe operators. And we should see the numbers get a little bit bigger this time, right? Because we are using an OR condition. Okay, so that's going to catch. So it looks like there are quite a few high priority orders that aren't going out via express ship for some reason. Okay, so that's your calculate function in a nutshell. Okay, let's look at one more thing, and this one I think is maybe what was happening to stuff earlier, which is the all function. So what we're going to do with all is completely like nuke any kind of a function. So rather than filtering by any given criteria, we're actually just going to say, give me all the data invariant of any kind of filter. So we're really going the opposite way. Rather than adding filters to our data, we're going to remove any filters from our data. Because if this thing, let me actually remove the order date and come up with a better field. Let's do let's do customer segment, for example. If I add this to customer segment, okay, incorporate, these numbers are still changing, right? So we're getting total sales for high priority or express script. But, if I wanted to filter this and I added home filter on here or home office or customer or whatever, right, they're still kind of beholden to this grand total, to this filter, if that makes sense, right? Like we're able to see total sales for high priority or express ship, but this filter is still controlling that. So what we really want to do now is like totally nuke this filter at all. Okay, so we were able to modify our filter with calculate. If you think about it, like we were able to tweak it a little bit. Now what we're going to do is just remove the filters altogether. So we're always going to get the same number no matter what. Okay, and that might have been what was happening in that earlier measure. So if I go to new measures, what we're going to do here is, let's call this all total sales. Okay, and I'm going to make this calculate. Okay, and we're still going to use total sales. Okay, and now let's do the all function here. All right, the all function orders. Okay, close parentheses. Check formula, not a bad idea to do. Okay, and currency. Okay, so let me go ahead and put that in the chat there. All right, and we'll click OK. Okay, so this is really where we're seeing the grand total is really invariant to any kind of a, right? Any filter that we have, it's not going to change. Okay. So this can be really useful, right? When you do want to compare a given number to a whole. And again, we want to do maybe like a ranking, percent of, lots of different applications that you can apply here. But what you're seeing here is that, it can be really difficult with the pivot table. It feels like you're trying to walk and chew gum at the same time. You want to be able to report maybe data for one region versus another, and maybe one filter versus another. And then you want to be able to compare it to the whole. And you're trying to do all these things, and they're all different filter contexts. Right now, what you can do with these measures is you're able to, right, use them all in the same pivot table. So it gives you a lot more precision and power and control over the data in your report. All right, so we're going to do one more set of functions. We're going to use the time intelligent functions to do that. Any questions about what we're doing here before we move on to time intelligence? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. I'm gonna take that as a no. All right. And I will say also that, there are, like, I know that Tony, I think, asked about different functions. There are a lot of people have a lot of competing philosophies on how to do this stuff best in Power Pivot and in DAX. Okay. Some people say never use calculate, and they have other ways to do this stuff. Some people say always use calculate. So this is just one way to do it. I am not an expert on DAX by any means or by any measure, no pun intended. Okay, but this is, I would say, the standard stuff. Okay, I would say that I think when DAX was created, this is probably the way that it was intended to be used. Okay, but you might read an introduction to DAX by some other people that show you completely different ways to do this stuff. So I'm just throwing that out there and letting you know that, I don't have a monopoly on DAX, and there are people that are far more, knowledgeable on DAX than myself, but I do know the basics, so that's what we're going to talk about now. So the last thing that we're going to talk about is time intelligence, which I think is like really cool because this is always an issue that I had with my data in Excel. You've got your data in the workbook, but people want to say, what does that compare to last year, right? What were last year's sales? Or how does that compare month over month? Or you're always trying to compare one number to another. And I think even in my book, I mentioned, I start this section off with a quote from Edward Tufte, who's really well known in data visualization circles. He said, at the heart of quantitative reasoning is a single question, compared to what, right? So we're always, just giving a number is one thing, but actually comparing it and contextualizing it is something else. And that's really what Calculate allows us to do much more efficiently than regular pivot tables. Okay, so what we're going to do here is compare, like I said, year to date, okay, month over month, that kind of stuff. All right, we're going to do that with filter context again. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually go back to my data model. Okay, so you click Manage Data Model. All right. And what we're going to do is add a calendar table. So what the calendar table does for us is it provides a consistent set of dates and consistent set of datetime structures. It's going to make our data analysis go a little more efficiently and a little more accurate. It's going to enable these advanced time-based calculation functions. So what we want to do is let's actually go to our diagram view here. Okay. And we're going to go to design. Okay. Diagram view. You just putting this in the chat. Design. Okay. And then date table. Okay. And then there's this one here. It says new date table. So just click new date table. All right. What this is going to do, Power Pivot does this on the back end. It is going to kind of mine through the tables that we have and understand what the date ranges are and set us up with a kind of a uniform, like, crosswalk table of dates that's going to make our date calculations a lot more efficient and effective here. All right. So that's taken a while here. I think my Excel might have actually froze here. Hopefully somebody's able to do it. Worst case scenario is I can always go to the solution file and walk you through that. All right, let me close out Control Alt Delete here. Let me try to close out of Excel. And see if that helps. All right. End task. Okay, so what I might do is once I get this closed down, I'll just go to the solution file, and that way you know it's in there anyway. Okay, come on. All right. Okay, there we go. All right, let me open this up just for the sake of time here. Okay, so hopefully some of you were able to actually create the calendar table from scratch. All right, let me go back to Power Pivot. Okay, and manage. Okay, diagram view. Okay, so it should look something like this. Okay. Now, what you might need to do here is, even if you've added the calendar table, it's still not going to be associated with any other table in our data model here. So what you want to do is actually, the last thing you'll do here is where it says date, you want to define that relationship. Okay, let me just double check the way that I did this. Okay, let me remove this. So hopefully some of you see something like this. You've got the calendar table and it's kind of off on its own world now. What we're going to do is actually define this based on one of our fields here. We're going to do this based on order date. Okay. So when we're saying like year-to-date sales, it's based on when that order is placed. Now, those of you who are accountants in the room know that this is a contentious topic, right? When is an order actually placed, right? Is it when the customer picks it up? Is it when they place the order? Da, 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 da. Okay. So if you do have a situation like that where, maybe we were looking at ship dates earlier, maybe you're more interested in when things actually ship, right? Because you're looking at like velocity or put through or whatever. There is an order date or ship date column in here somewhere. There is a way to actually toggle, for some measures, you want to make it based on ship date versus some, or based on order date. Okay, you can do that. You're actually going to need to create another measure to do that. It's a lot more easy to do that in Power BI. A lot of things are a little easier to do in Power BI than in Excel. Okay, but we're just going to say everything is based on ship date. Okay, I'm sorry, based on order date. So again, what I did here is just drag and drop date into order date. Okay, I've already created that relationship. Okay, and it's good there. Okay, so now what we've got here is, you'll see there's like all sorts of different attributes with years. There are different date formats. There's a date hierarchy, right? So this is a lot more robust of a way to allow us to work with dates than if we didn't have this calendar table. And it's also going to allow us to base measures on, cross different dates, right? Is it based on ship date or based on order date and so forth? Any questions with any of that? Making sense? Sorry, I had to skip a step there, but you should see something like this now. Awesome. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and close here. Okay. And there should be a time intelligence pivot table that's already been created if you're in the solution file. Okay. If you're not in the solution file, that's fine. What we'll do here is, let me actually we're going to go to measures just for the sake of time here. I think, because I know we're kind of running out of time. Let me go to measures and manage measures. So you're going to see here that I've got quite a few different measures here. And again, this is kind of small. I will put this in the chat just for the heck of it, but you do have the solution file available. So what you'll do is just go to Chapter 9 Solutions. So you'll see that I'm using Calculate for a great number of these measures. Okay, so if I wanted to create something like year to date, there's actually a year to date measure, okay, in DAX, and I wish I could make this a little bigger. Let me actually edit this. Okay, So if I wanted to compare my data year to date, I have a total year to date function that will do that. And I'm basing it on the calendar date. Okay, so it's going to give me total sales relative to calendar date. All right. If I wanted to look at something like last year's sales, okay, I'm going to use the calculate function there. What I'm going to say is give me total sales, but I'm going to modify that filter context, same period last year. So it is what it sounds like, right? Give me total sales, but shift that filter context so that it's giving me the sales from last year based on the calendar date. Again, everything is relative to order date. Got some other ones here like year-to-date sales. I think I have, I thought I had last year. Yeah, last year sales. Okay, so all different things that we can do here. And that allows us to create a pivot table like this. So I've got total sales, year-to-date sales, last year sales, and then last year year-to-date sales. So you can actually even kind of cross-check the numbers here, right? So some of these are year-to-date. So you'll see that they should grow over time. I'm not sure why that one is not, doesn't seem to be working accurately. Uh, let's see. Let me try to refresh this thing and see if that works. We might add them on again too. I don't know if redoing the calendar table maybe mess something up here. Okay. I'll try to fix this in the solutions. Let me try to, let's remove this, remove this. Okay. And let's take year-to-date sales here. Okay, and drag and drop that. Okay. Well, something doesn't seem right here. So let's see what's going on here. Total year to date, total sales calendar date. Let me close this and reopen and see if that's working better. Okay. Okay, well, this might need to be revisited here. I wonder if this filter's doing anything. All right. Okay, 506. Okay, so I will take a look at what's going on here. Hopefully, I don't know if anybody's able to see those measures actually working correctly. Obviously, this is not the solution that we would want here, but I think we'll just leave it as is for right now. This is all in the book too, so if you want to walk through it yourself, and you should get it to work. I know we don't have a lot of time to troubleshoot, so just gonna go ahead and leave it at that for right now. But again, if you do need to do something like this, take year to date, month over month, things like that, you can use filter context to do that. All right, so that's really all we have time for right now. Let me share a couple of things with you. Okay, so the first thing is my feedback. So if you would be so kind, I will share this out over email as well. Okay, but I would love to just get a quick thought from you on what you thought about today. I actually have a modern Excel kit that you're going to get, a starter kit. It's just like a few pages PDF kind of thing. If you fill this out, should take you like less than a minute to fill this out. So if you could do that, that would be great. I would really, really appreciate it. These are all free. Unfortunately, I can't teach Excel for free, 40 hours a week. So I do have to do other things, and just getting some data from you is really, really useful for me to let me keep doing these events. The other thing is that I have more events coming up. Okay, so let me actually share that here on my screen. Okay. And okay, my computer is very slow right now, but just see I've got a lot of stuff coming up about all sorts of topics. Okay, we're going to talk about AI next week, Python and Excel, Power BI, all sorts of good stuff. The vast majority of these are recorded, and the vast majority of these are free. So sign up for as many as you want, and usually you'll get the recording if you can't make it, etc. So next steps with this one is going to be I will send out the recording, okay, and in an email. It's going to be on my YouTube page. I'll post all that stuff. I'll take a look at those measures, or try to. I don't know why the year to date and things like that weren't working, but I might try to just repost it to the page. Let me know if anybody, just email me. You'll have my email from the event if you need help with anything. And I think that's it. So I'm going to stop sharing and stop recording. Okay, and we will call it a day.